The fluorescent lights of Riverside Mall in Portland, Oregon hummed softly above the Tuesday afternoon shoppers. Among them, 68-year-old Margaret Foster moved slowly through the cosmetics section of Nordstrom, her faithful companion, Max, padding beside her. The golden retriever wore his service dog vest proudly, his warm brown eyes alert and focused on his handler. For 5 years, Max had been Margaret's constant guardian, trained to detect the dangerous drops in blood sugar that came with her diabetes. But on this ordinary November afternoon, Max was about to prove that his abilities extended far beyond what anyone had trained him to do. It started with something subtle, something most people would never notice. Max stopped walking. Margaret tugged gently on his leash, expecting him to follow as he always did. But Max remained frozen, his entire body rigid with attention. His gaze was locked on something across the aisle, near the men's cologne counter. A man in an expensive charcoal suit stood there, seemingly browsing, his phone pressed to his ear. "Max, come on, boy," Margaret whispered, puzzled. Max never stopped like this. He was trained, disciplined, responsive, but the golden retriever wouldn't budge. Instead, he let out a low, insistent whine that made the hairs on the back of Margaret's neck stand up. The man at the cologne counter glanced their way, his expression tight with what looked like irritation. He ended his phone call abruptly and began walking toward the exit. That's when Max did something he had never done before in 5 years of service. He pulled forward with surprising strength, positioning himself directly in the stranger's path. The man nearly stumbled, caught off guard by the sudden appearance of 70 pounds of determined dog blocking his way. "Excuse me," the man said, his voice strained. He tried to step around Max, but the golden retriever moved with him, staying directly in front. The man's face had gone pale, a sheen of sweat visible on his forehead despite the mall's air conditioning. Was Max malfunctioning? Had something triggered an aggressive response? Or was the dog protecting Margaret from a threat none of them could see? What happened next would prove that sometimes the greatest heroes have 4 legs and a heart that sees what human eyes cannot. Margaret's hands trembled as she tried to pull Max back. "I'm so sorry, sir. He's never done anything like this before." "Max, heal!" But Max wouldn't heal. He wouldn't move. He stood planted between the stranger and the mall exit, his body tense but not aggressive. His tail wasn't wagging, but it wasn't tucked either. He simply stood there, immovable as a mountain, his eyes never leaving the man's face. A small crowd had begun to gather. Shoppers slowed their pace, curious about the commotion. A saleswoman behind the Clinique counter picked up her phone, probably calling security. The man in the suit tried again to move around Max. "Look, lady, I don't have time for this. I need to get your dog out of my way." Now, there was desperation in his voice that made Margaret look at him more closely. Really look at him. His face wasn't just pale. It was gray. Sweat now dripped down his temples. His left hand clutched the edge of a display counter as if he needed it for support. His breathing came in short, sharp gasps. "Sir," Margaret said, her voice rising with alarm. "Are you okay? You don't look well." "I'm fine," he insisted, but his words came out weak and breathy. "Just need to get to my car." "Important meeting." Max pressed closer, not aggressively, but firmly. He leaned his body against the man's legs, and suddenly Margaret understood. This wasn't aggression. This wasn't protection. This was an alert. Max had detected something wrong with this stranger. Something dangerous. Something medical. "You're having a heart attack," Margaret said with sudden clarity. Years of managing her own medical condition had taught her to recognize a medical crisis when she saw one. "No," the man protested, trying once more to push past Max. "Just indigestion. Really. I need to go. I have a patient waiting. I'm a doctor. I know my own body." But as the words left his mouth, his knees buckled. Max was already there, his sturdy body providing support as the man began to collapse. Margaret grabbed his arm, helping to ease him down to the floor as gently as possible. "Someone call 911, Margaret shouted. "This man is having a heart attack." The Clinique saleswoman was already on the phone with security, but a young man in a Nike hoodie pulled out his cell phone and dialed emergency services. Within seconds, a mall security guard came sprinting around the corner, radio crackling. The doctor on the floor looked up at Margaret with eyes wide with fear and something else. Recognition, understanding. The dog. He gasped. The dog knew. "What's your name?" Margaret asked, kneeling beside him while Max pressed his warm body against the man's side, providing comfort and stability. "Dr. Harrison Chen," he managed. "Cardiac surgeon, Mercy Hospital." Each word was an effort. "I have surgery. 30 minutes. Emergency. Young mother. Aortic dissection. If I don't operate." He couldn't finish the sentence, his face contorting with pain. Margaret's blood ran cold. This man wasn't just fighting for his own life. Someone else's life hung in the balance too. Max whined softly, nudging Dr. Chen's hand with his nose. The Golden Retriever's training had prepared him to alert for Margaret's blood sugar, but what he was doing now went beyond training. This was pure instinct, pure empathy. Max could sense distress, could detect the subtle changes in body chemistry that signaled danger, and he had refused to let this stranger walk into a potentially fatal situation. "Help is coming," Margaret assured him, her hand on his shoulder. She could feel his heart hammering irregularly beneath her palm. "Stay still. Don't try to talk." The young man with the phone knelt beside them. "Ambulance is 3 minutes out." They said to keep him calm and still. 3 minutes. But Dr. Chen's surgery was 30 minutes away, and that clock was ticking. Margaret looked at Max, who sat perfectly still, his eyes fixed on the doctor's face with unwavering attention. The dog who had never failed her, who had saved her life more times than she could count, had just saved a complete stranger. But would it be enough? The mall security guard, a woman in her 30s named Torres according to her name tag, arrived with a first aid kit. "Ambulance is pulling up to the north entrance now." "Is he responsive?" "Barely," Margaret said. "He's a cardiac surgeon. He was on his way to an emergency surgery." Officer Torres's eyes widened. She immediately grabbed her radio. "This is Torres at Nordstrom. We need to contact Mercy Hospital. Stat. Their cardiac surgeon is down. They have an emergency case waiting." Dr. Chen's hand suddenly gripped Margaret's wrist with surprising strength. "Emma Rodriguez," he forced out. 28. Postpartum. Type A dissection. She has 2 kids. Tell them. Dr. Morrison. Backup surgeon. Call him." Margaret looked up at Officer Torres. "Did you get that?" Torres nodded, already relaying the information through her radio. The urgency of the situation had crystallized into something even more complicated than a medical emergency. This was a race against 2 clocks now. The crowd had grown larger, a circle of concerned faces watching the drama unfold. An older woman clutched her purse, tears in her eyes. A teenager filmed on his phone, then seemed to think better of it and put it away. A mother pulled her small children back, shielding them from the frightening scene. The sound of sirens grew louder, echoing through the mall's corridors. Within seconds, paramedics rushed in with a stretcher and medical equipment. They moved with practiced efficiency, immediately assessing Dr. Chen's condition. "Looks like an MI." The lead paramedic, a man with gray hair and steady hands, announced. "Probable anterior wall. We need to move fast." "He's a surgeon," Margaret interjected. "Cardiac surgeon. He has an emergency patient waiting at Mercy Hospital." "Aortic dissection," he said. The paramedic's jaw tightened. He knew what that meant. "We'll call it in. Right now, we need to stabilize him and get him to the nearest emergency room." "That would be Mercy Hospital," Officer Torres said. "It's 12 minutes from here." As the paramedics worked, hooking up an IV and oxygen, Max remained at Dr. Chen's side. He hadn't moved, hadn't wavered in his vigil. When one of the paramedics tried to gently push the dog back to make room, Max looked at Margaret with pleading eyes. "It's okay, Max," Margaret said softly, fighting back tears. "You did your job. You saved him." But Max seemed unconvinced. He watched intently as the paramedics lifted Dr. Chen onto the stretcher, his tail finally giving a small, worried wag. Dr. Chen's eyes found Margaret's one more time as they prepared to wheel him away. "Thank you," he mouthed. "Your dog saved my life." Margaret nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Officer Torres touched her shoulder gently. "Ma'am, can you give me your contact information? The hospital will want to follow up, and probably the police too." Margaret provided her details, her hands still shaking from the adrenaline. As the ambulance sirens faded into the distance, the crowd began to disperse. People returning to their shopping with hushed conversations and backward glances. Max sat down, finally relaxed, and looked up at Margaret with what could only be described as satisfaction. She knelt down and wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face in his soft fur. "You amazing boy," she whispered. "You incredible, amazing boy." But the story was far from over. The question that haunted Margaret as she made her way home that afternoon was whether Dr. Chen would recover in time, whether Emma Rodriguez, the young mother with 2 children, would survive, whether Max's intervention had truly saved 2 lives or only delayed the inevitable. The call came the next morning. Margaret was having breakfast, Max at her feet as always, when her phone rang. An unknown number with a Portland area code. "Mrs. Foster, this is Diane Jameson from Mercy Hospital. I'm calling about Dr. Harrison Chen." Margaret's heart leapt into her throat. "Is he okay?" "He's stable," Diane said, and Margaret could hear the smile in her voice. "He wants to speak with you. I'm going to transfer you to his room." There was a click, a moment of silence, and then a familiar voice, stronger than yesterday but still weak. "Mrs. Foster? This is Harrison Chen." "Dr. Chen? Thank God you're all right. Thanks to your dog," he said. "The cardiologist here told me I was about 15 minutes away from a massive coronary. If I had gotten in my car, driven to the hospital, started that surgery, I would have died on the table. Or worse, died while operating on Emma." Margaret's hand flew to her mouth. "Emma? Your patient? Is she?" "Dr. Morrison performed the surgery," Dr. Chen said, his voice thick with emotion. "It took 6 hours. But Emma Rodriguez is alive. She's recovering. She's going to see her kids grow up." Tears spilled down Margaret's cheeks. Max whined softly at her feet, sensing her distress and immediately nudging her leg with his nose. "Max saved both of us," Dr. Chen continued. "I've been a cardiac surgeon for 23 years. I've saved hundreds of lives. But I never imagined that one day, a dog would save mine and give me the chance to save another." He paused. "I need to meet him properly, to thank him. And you." 3 days later, Margaret and Max entered Mercy Hospital's cardiac wing. Dr. Chen was sitting up in bed, looking remarkably better, despite the monitors and IV lines. His wife, Linda, sat beside him, holding his hand. The moment Max entered the room, his tail began wagging furiously. He pulled gently on his leash, eager to reach the doctor. Dr. Chen's face broke into a wide smile. "There he is. There's my hero." Margaret released Max's leash, and the golden retriever trotted to Dr. Chen's bedside. The doctor reached out with both hands, scratching behind Max's ears, ruffling his fur, his eyes shining with tears. "How did you know?" he murmured. "How did you possibly know?" "Service dogs are trained to detect changes in blood chemistry," Margaret explained. "For me, he alerts when my blood sugar drops. But what he did for you, that wasn't part of his training. That was pure instinct. He sensed something wrong, and he wouldn't let you leave." Linda Chen wiped tears from her eyes. "The doctor said if Harrison had gotten behind the wheel, he would have crashed. If he had made it to the hospital and started the surgery, both he and Emma would have died. Your dog didn't just save one life. He saved at least 3, if you count the children who still have their mother." "Speaking of which," Dr. Chen said, his smile growing wider, "there's someone else who wants to meet Max." A nurse wheeled in a woman in her late 20s, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, her face pale, but smiling. 2 small children walked beside her, a boy about 6, and a girl no more than 4, both holding tightly to their mother's hands. "Mrs. Foster? I'm Emma Rodriguez, the woman said, her voice soft but filled with emotion. I heard about what your dog did, how he saved Dr. Chen, and how that meant Dr. Morrison could perform my surgery. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I'm alive because of Max. My babies still have their mama because of him. The little girl, eyes wide with wonder, looked at Max. Is he a good doggy? Margaret smiled through her own tears. The very best doggy in the whole world. Dr. Chen gestured for everyone to come closer. I've been thinking a lot over the past few days. About purpose. About why things happen. I'm a man of science, but I also believe in something greater. Some people might call it fate. Others call it God. Whatever it is, I believe Max was meant to be in that mall at that exact moment. I know I was, Margaret said quietly. I almost didn't go shopping that day. I had a headache, thought about staying home. But Max was restless. He kept going to the door, kept nudging his leash. It was like he knew he needed to be there. Linda Chen shook her head in wonder. It's a miracle. That's the only word for it. The room fell quiet for a moment. Everyone watching as Max sat calmly beside Emma's wheelchair, allowing the two children to gently pet his soft fur. The little girl giggled as Max licked her hand, and the boy's face lit up with pure joy. I want to do something, Dr. Chen said suddenly. I've contacted the hospital board. We're establishing a fund to support service dog training programs, not just for diabetes or seizures, but expanded training for cardiac detection, cancer detection, all of it. We're calling it the Max Fund. Margaret gasped. Dr. Chen, you don't have to. Yes, I do, he insisted. Max saved my life. The least I can do is help train more dogs like him. Dogs who can sense what humans can't. Dogs who refuse to let someone walk into danger. Over the following weeks, the story spread. Local news picked it up first. Hero dog saves doctor and patient in mall medical emergency. Then regional papers. Then national morning shows. Max became something of a celebrity. But he remained the same gentle, attentive companion he had always been. More interested in Margaret's well-being than in his newfound fame. The Max Fund grew beyond anyone's expectations. Donations poured in from across the country. Training programs for medical detection dogs received funding. Research into canine sensory abilities expanded. And at the center of it all was a golden retriever who had simply followed his instincts and refused to let a stranger make a fatal mistake. Dr. Chen returned to work 6 weeks after his heart attack, with a renewed appreciation for life and a cardiac defibrillator implanted in his chest. Emma Rodriguez recovered fully and brought her children to visit Max every month, a tradition that continued for years. Margaret Foster, who had spent 5 years being grateful that Max watched over her, now understood that his gift extended far beyond one person. Some dogs are trained to be heroes. Others are born to it. Max was both. On a sunny afternoon in December, Margaret and Max returned to Riverside Mall. Not to shop, but to attend a ceremony. The mall had commissioned a bronze plaque, mounted near the Nordstrom entrance, commemorating the events of that November day. It read, on this spot, Max, a service dog, detected a medical emergency and refused to let a stranger continue toward danger. His actions saved the lives of Dr. Harrison Chen and patient Emma Rodriguez, reminding us that heroes come in all forms, and that sometimes the greatest acts of love are performed by those who cannot speak, but who see with a heart full of loyalty and courage. Dr. Chen and his wife stood beside Emma and her children. Hospital staff had come. Local news cameras captured the moment. But the real moment, the one that mattered most, was when Max sat beside the plaque, his tail wagging slowly, his warm brown eyes looking up at Margaret with simple, unconditional love. Real heroes don't always wear badges or white coats, Dr. Chen said to the assembled crowd. Sometimes they have 4 legs and fur. Sometimes they're trained to save one life, but end up saving many. Max didn't just save me that day. He reminded all of us that paying attention, that listening to our instincts, that refusing to ignore something that doesn't feel right, those things matter. They can mean the difference between life and death. As the ceremony ended and people began to leave, Emma's little girl tugged on Margaret's sleeve. "Miss Margaret? Can I tell Max something?" "Of course, sweetie." The child knelt down, putting her small face close to Max's. "Thank you for saving my mommy," she whispered. "You're the best dog ever." Max's tail wagged harder, and he gently licked the girl's cheek, making her giggle. It was a simple moment, unremarkable to anyone watching, but to Margaret it represented everything. Every early morning walk, every training session, every moment she had invested in Max had led to this. Had led to a split-second decision in a shopping mall that had rippled out to save lives and change futures. That evening, back home in her small house, Margaret sat on her couch with Max's head in her lap. The 11 o'clock news played on the TV, showing footage of the day's ceremony, but Margaret wasn't watching. She was stroking Max's soft ears, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing, marveling at the mystery of connection between human and animal. "You know what, Max?" she said softly. "I spent 5 years thinking you were here to take care of me, but maybe I was here to take care of you. To make sure you were in that mall on that day. To make sure you could do what you were meant to do." Max's tail thumped against the couch cushion. "Or maybe," Margaret continued, scratching behind his ears in the spot that made him groan with contentment, "maybe we were meant to take care of each other, and everyone else along the way." Outside, Portland settled into its December evening. Lights twinkling in windows, families gathering for dinner, the ordinary rhythm of life continuing as it always did. But for Margaret Foster, Dr. Harrison Chen, Emma Rodriguez, and 2 small children who still had their mother, life would never be quite ordinary again. They had been touched by something extraordinary. They had witnessed the kind of heroism that doesn't announce itself with sirens or fanfare, the kind that simply stands its ground, refuses to move, and insists with quiet determination that this person, this stranger, this life, matters. And it had come in the form of a golden retriever named Max, who had proven that sometimes the greatest love is expressed not through grand gestures or eloquent words, but through the simple act of refusing to let someone walk away when danger beckons. As Margaret turned off the lights and headed to bed, Max padding faithfully beside her, she thought about all the service dogs in the world, all the quiet guardians who watched over their humans with patience and devotion, all the 4-legged heroes who would never make the news, who would never receive plaques or ceremonies, but who performed miracles every single day simply by being present, by being attentive, by caring enough to act when action was needed. "Sweet dreams, Max," she whispered as he settled onto his bed beside hers. Max's tail wagged one more time before he closed his eyes, content in the knowledge that he had done his job, that he had protected, had served, had saved, that he had, in his own way, made the world a little bit better. And really, what more could any hero ask for than that?